In the 1960s and 70s, the United States was at war in Vietnam. Over 58,000 Americans died and some 2.5 million served. Dan Merklin was one of those soldiers that served. This is part of his story. And you grew up in Isle Falls?
Yep. Born and raised in Isle Falls. Lived here most of my life.
And then your dad and mom were?
Jim and Susie Merklin.
And your dad ran the blacksmith shop.
That's right.
And then I can remember us coming by as a kid that I'd want to go home and play, but you had to come work at a young age.
Yeah, I did.
About what time, how old were you when you started helping your dad at the blacksmith?
About 10.
10. And what would you do?
Swept the shop, cleaned the machinery, did small, easy-to-do jobs. My father's uncle started it in 1918 and then sold it when they retired to my father in about 1948.
And then you and your brother took it over?
Yeah, and then Tom and I took it over in 1981. It's been in the family for over 100 years. Well, it'll be 100 years in 1918. In 2018, it'll be 100 years.
Oh, did you like growing up in Isle Falls for hometown?
Oh, I couldn't beat it.
Okay.
Everybody was friendly to everybody else. You knew everybody else. You always didn't have any trouble having a good time.
And then after high school?
After high school, I didn't have a job right away, and I hadn't planned on going to school. So that was the summer after I graduated. That was when Vietnam was pretty much at its peak, and the draft was still on. So I decided that I was probably going to get drafted because I wasn't married, didn't have a job, and didn't plan on going to school, so I figured I'd pretty much going to be going to the draft. So that's when I decided to volunteer for the Navy. At that time, I knew I did not want to get drafted because it was not a good situation. We hear from boys like your brother coming back and saying that that's someplace you didn't want to go. Well, I didn't want to go in the Army and be in the infantry. I figured the Navy would be a better place for me. But at that time, the only enlistment in the Navy was for 4 years. And I didn't feel I wanted to spend 4 years in the Navy. So I got to looking into it, and the Navy had a program they called the Seabees, where if you had prior construction experience, they were looking for men with experience, and they were offering a 2-year enlistment with a pay grade of E4, which is about like a corporal in the Army. And I thought, well, that's for me. Only 2 years and I go in with higher pay grade. So I interviewed with the Navy down in Des Moines to see if I could qualify to get into the Seabees. And at first I had a little trouble because they didn't think an 18-year-old kid knew anything about anything. So they told me to have, if I could get some resumes and some letters of recommendation, that would help. So I did, from various people around the town that said that they said in effect that I knew how to weld and I knew how to do repair work on farm equipment. As for construction battalion, the Navy had units of approximately 600 men to the unit that acted like a large construction company. They had plumbers, electricians, carpenters, welders, equipment operators. They could do any kind of construction job that they needed to do on their own.
Take your basic training.
They had basic training at Gulfport, Mississippi for 5 weeks. I was assigned to a mobile construction battalion that was based in Davisville, Rhode Island.
And Was this kind of the first time you were away from home?
Absolutely.
And what was it like the first time away from home?
Well, it took a little getting used to, but after a while, you grow up. You start depending on yourself instead of somebody else to make your way.
Once you got in the CBs, that you would eventually end up in Vietnam.
Yeah, that was part of the deal. They didn't pull any punches on that. They said, you're going to go to Vietnam, but you're not going to go in the infantry. I said, oh, I'll give it a shot.
Well, you really didn't have much of a say-so, though, once you joined up.
No, you went where they sent you. From Rhode Island to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for Marine Corps military training. And so we learned weapons, light weapons like M16s, M60 machine guns, the grenade launcher, everything up to an 81 millimeter mortar. We had to be proficient on all of them. Well, of course, there were some tears shed on my mother's side, and my father didn't want me to go at all, but they got over it. They gave me the benefit of the doubt, letting me do what I wanted to do, what I felt I had to do.
So you felt like it was a patriotic condition of being American.
Yeah.
You were going to serve your country.
Right. From Rhode Island to Oakland, California, picked up some more fuel, flew to Hawaii, picked up some more fuel and changed planes, flew to Guam, picked up some more fuel, and then flew into Da Nang, Vietnam for there. That was a 24-hour in the air trip. That's the longest trip I've ever had to take. Got all very quiet. Before we were circling the airstrip to land, there was a lot of chatter and a lot of laughing and shouting and stuff. As soon as we got ready to land, you could hear a pin drop. Everybody realized that this is for real. This is not training anymore. This is the real thing. Landed in Vietnam, and first thing we did was get out the door of the airplane, and they were under rocket attack. And I thought, Jesus, what did I get myself into here? I'm not even on the ground in Vietnam, and they're shooting at me. But I come to find out later that was a common thing, almost a regular occurrence, that the airport got shelled. Just a couple. They call it harassment. Da Nang Air Base is a pretty good sized facility, so nothing ever came close to me. The first thing they did was throw a M16 in my hands and told me to grab 80 rounds and go into a bunker down here and get ready for anything. Nothing happened. At that time, that was Tet, 1969. They were expecting another Tet offensive at that time, so they weren't taking any chances.
So the Tet offensive was, if I recall correctly, was the worst time to be in Vietnam, because it's when the most of the fighting took place.
A lot of it, yeah. In the cities and out of the cities. It was pretty much a general attack throughout the whole country.
Okay.
Well, they came out of the jungles and attacked the cities, which the Americans beat them back, but it was a psychological blow to the American army and people that showed everybody that the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese were not beat by any chance. From the permanent base, we did all the jobs in the area. They called it, Vietnam was split into three. I believe it's three different partitions, and one in the north, one in the middle, and one in the south. So what they call I Corps is where we were at, in the top of Vietnam, and we did most of our construction projects in that area. But from the base camp, we would travel out by truck to do the jobs. I didn't go out in the field very much. I stayed back in the base camp most of the time as a maintenance welder for our heavy equipment, the road building equipment, which was always breaking down. So most of my time was spent fixing that heavy equipment. On occasions, I had to go out and do a little weld job outside the gate, but only on a couple occasions.
Now, what would that consist of when you went outside the...
Well, one time we had to go to a forward Marine base to fix their well. Their well had went dry, and I needed to weld some well casing for the well drillers so the Marines could get some water. And one other time I had to, just little stuff like, they had to patch a hole in they use this matting, they call it, to make airstrips and landing zones. It's metal, pieces of metal that lay down and interlock, and you can make a landing strip out of it. When the enemy would shoot a rocket or a mortar at it, it'd mess it up real bad so nobody could land on it. So instead of replacing everything, we got to just welding a new piece in. So I got the job of welding new pieces in over the shell crater, so the airplanes and the helicopters could land again safely. You learn to distinguish the sound of a rocket real quick. You got about 2 seconds to hit the deck. It's got a very distinct whistling sound to it. We'd leave early in the morning and do our work and make sure that we could get back to the compound before dark, because it did not want to stay after dark. Bulldozers and road scrapers and backhoes and whatever it takes to build a road, cranes, whatever it takes to build a bridge, that kind of equipment. That was the bulk of my time was spent repairing that kind of stuff. Did 2 tours, supposedly, 9 months over, 6 months back, 9 months over, total of 18. But at that time, Nixon decided to wind the war down, what he called it, Vietnamization and withdrawal. So I was part of the withdrawal, so I only spent 7 months in Vietnam. And then came home and they started to pull out. Yeah, one time, what they called it was a hog hauler. It's a big old clunky cargo plane. They converted to spray this herbicide. Flew over our base camp and was spraying. Didn't want to spray our base camp, but they misjudged the wind, and all that stuff came and fell on and sprayed everybody in the base camp with this sticky stuff. I don't know what. They told us it was mosquito repellent. I said, I don't think so. I don't know what. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't mosquito repellent.
Agent Orange was a chemical used to kill the foliage that grew around the rivers and the roads to protect the American soldiers. 12.5 million gallons of Agent Orange was used. Many health issues came from the use of Agent Orange. Birth defects, cancer, and Parkinson's One Parkinson study showed that the general public, 2 in 1,000, the Vietnam vets, 8 in 1,000, and the Vietnam veterans that worked with Agent Orange, 17 in 1,000, would come down with Parkinson's type issues.
They used the road building equipment also to buck back all the dead vegetation alongside of the roads to get it out of the way so there's no place to hide. So all the equipment was soaked with Agent Orange, and I had to work on all that stuff. They should have told me to wear a gas mask, but nobody knew what the problem with Agent Orange was, so they didn't bother to warn anybody about it.
And that's affected you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It affected my health pretty bad.
Because I can see now that you're sitting there shaking.
Yeah, I've got Parkinson's disease.
And you had prostate cancer.
Yeah, I had prostate, and I got diabetes now.
It's been sprayed with Agent Orange.
Yeah.
It's a higher percentage of them have it than the general public.
That's right. I can't give you the exact figures for Parkinson's, but it's something like 1 in 100 citizens in the United States come up with Parkinson's, and it's more like 1 in 49 Vietnam veterans come down with Parkinson's disease. The people were beautiful people and friendly people, but they didn't care if they were communists or capitalists. Basically all they cared about was feeding their families. They really didn't have a sense of loyalty to their government, and I can understand why, because their government was corrupt. So, happiest day of my life. Gonna go home.
And you're going home early. Did you have an idea that you would be going home early?
No. No. And just one day they told us we're part of the withdrawal and get ready to go. We're leaving.
And how much of a notice did they give you?
About 2 weeks. We had to get our equipment ready. We turned all the equipment over to the South Vietnamese. They called it Vietnamization, where Nixon was going to turn everything over to the South Vietnamese and let them sink or swim. Everybody clapped and cheered when we got up in the air. Everybody was pretty glad to get out of there.
What was that like, seeing Mom and Dad again?
Oh, well, it was pretty good. Of course, I didn't have to do anything. I got weighted on hand and foot. Got fed pretty well. Didn't have to work like it was. In Vietnam, we worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain or shine. Sometimes it was 110 degrees, 100% humidity.